Loren Sharp, a billionaire investor, widowed, childless, lonely, and bitter, receives an unexpected invitation from her housekeeper, Rosita Sales, to join her family's Christmas dinner. What happened next? No one could have imagined. What if a single Christmas dinner could change a billionaire's life forever? Before we continue, tell us in the comments where in the world you're watching the video from. And don't forget to subscribe. Loren Sharp sat in the grand living room of her opulent mansion, a space filled with the vestiges of a life once vibrant and full. The room was adorned with lavish decorations, twinkling lights that cast a soft glow against the dark wood paneling, and an oversized Christmas tree that stood sentinel in the corner, its ornaments shimmering like memories of happier times. Outside, the world was enveloped in a thick blanket of snow, transforming the landscape into a winter wonderland. Yet, for Loren, the beauty of it was overshadowed by an overwhelming sense of solitude. As she gazed out the expansive window, her thoughts drifted back to the Christmases of her past, when laughter echoed through the halls, and the air was filled with the scent of roasting turkey and freshly baked pies. Her late husband, Robert, had adored the holiday season. He would spend weeks preparing, ensuring everything was perfect, from the decorations to the carefully curated guest list. Loren had loved those days, the warmth of family, the joy of giving, the magic that seemed to hang in the air. But since his passing, that magic had faded, leaving only the bitter chill of loneliness in its wake. The clock on the mantelpiece chimed softly, marking the hour. Loren sighed, the sound resonating in the stillness of the room. She shifted in her seat, her gaze still fixed on the snowy expanse outside. It was Christmas Eve, and while the rest of the world celebrated with loved ones, Loren found herself in silence, the weight of her solitude pressing down upon her. The vibrant life she had once known felt like a distant memory, a ghost haunting the corners of her heart. Her reverie was interrupted by the gentle sound of footsteps approaching. Rosita Sales, her devoted housekeeper, entered the room, bringing with her a warmth that seemed to radiate even in the coldest of seasons. Rosita had been with Loren for years, a steadfast presence in an otherwise empty home. With her bright smile and kind demeanor, she had become not just an employee but a source of comfort in Loren's life. The contrast between Rosita's warmth and Loren's growing bitterness was stark, yet somehow it worked. With a tray of cookies and hot cocoa, Rosita approached, her eyes sparkling with a mix of excitement and concern. She had been observing Loren's descent into isolation, her heart aching for the woman who had once been so full of life. As she set the tray down on the coffee table, she took a moment to assess Loren's expression. The sadness lingered there, like a shadow refusing to dissipate. Rosita felt an urge to bring some joy into Loren's life, to remind her of the love and connection that still existed in the world, if only she would allow it. With a deep breath, Rosita spoke, her voice laced with sincerity. She had a plan, one that she believed could lift Loren's spirits from the depths of despair. The warmth of her family's Christmas dinner beckoned, and she felt certain that Loren's presence would add a touch of light to the occasion. Rosita had always believed that family was the antidote to loneliness, and she was determined to share that belief with Loren. As Rosita extended the invitation, Loren's heart fluttered with skepticism. The idea of stepping into a bustling household filled with laughter and chatter felt daunting. Her instinct was to retreat, to remain in the safety of her solitude, shielded from the emotions that the holiday season stirred within her. Yet, there was something in Rosita's expression, a spark of hope that ignited a flicker of curiosity in Loren's heart. Perhaps it was time to break free from the chains of her own making, to step out of the shadows and into the light, even if just for a few hours. After a moment of contemplation, Loren reluctantly agreed to attend the dinner, her heart racing with a mixture of apprehension and intrigue. The thought of mingling with Rosita's family, a lively group, no doubt, filled her with uncertainty. She imagined the noise, the joy, the togetherness, and felt a pang of longing for the life she once had. But beneath that longing lay a desire for connection, a yearning to feel something other than the weight of her solitude. As Rosita beamed with delight at Loren's acceptance, the atmosphere in the room shifted. Loren felt a small glimmer of hope rise within her, a fragile thread that connected her past to the present. She had spent too long wallowing in her bitterness, allowing the memories of her late husband to overshadow any possibility of joy. Perhaps this evening could be the first step toward rediscovering herself, toward embracing the warmth of human connection once more. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden hue across the snow-covered ground. Lorraine watched as the world outside transformed, the day giving way to the magic of evening. She knew she had to prepare for the dinner, to shed the layers of isolation that had become her second skin. As she moved through her home, she felt an unfamiliar flutter of excitement mingling with her apprehension. Choosing her outfit became a small ritual, an act of defiance against the solitude she had grown so accustomed to. Lorraine selected a deep emerald dress that hugged her figure, its elegance reflecting the woman she once was and still could be. She adorned herself with simple jewelry, a delicate necklace and earrings that sparkled softly, reminiscent of the twinkling lights that decorated her home. Looking in the mirror, Lorraine took a moment to appreciate the reflection staring back at her. A woman who had endured loss yet still possessed the strength to seek connection. As she left the comfort of her mansion and stepped into the cold, crisp air, Lorraine felt a mixture of trepidation and exhilaration. The world outside was alive, vibrant with the spirit of the season. Snowflakes danced around her as she made her way to Rosita's home, each flake a reminder of the beauty that could still exist despite her heartache. When she arrived at Rosita's house, the scene that unfolded before her was a stark contrast to her own solitary existence. Laughter spilled from the open door, mingling with the delicious aromas of traditional holiday dishes wafting through the air. It was a scene straight out of a storybook, one that filled Lorraine with a mixture of yearning and nostalgia. As she stepped inside, the warmth enveloped her, wrapping around her like a comforting embrace. Rosita's family was gathered in the living room, a tapestry of faces all glowing with joy and excitement. Children dashed around, their laughter ringing like music, while adults engaged in animated conversations, their voices rising and falling in a symphony of holiday cheer. Lorraine felt a pang of longing for the life she once had, the family gatherings filled with love and laughter. Yet, as she stood at the threshold, a flicker of hope ignited within her. Perhaps this was the moment she had been waiting for, the opportunity to reconnect with the world, to take the first step toward healing. As Rosita welcomed her with open arms, Lorraine felt the weight of her solitude begin to lift, if only just a little. In that moment, as she stepped further into the warmth of Rosita's family, Lorraine Sharp found herself at the precipice of change, standing on the edge of a new chapter in her life. Little did she know that the next few hours would unravel a series of events that would challenge her heart, test her resolve, and ultimately lead her down a path of rediscovery and unexpected connection. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting an orange glow across the snow-dusted landscape as Lorraine Sharp stepped out of her sleek black car. She stood for a moment at the threshold of Rosita's warm, inviting home, taking in the sounds of laughter and the tantalizing aromas wafting through the air. The stark contrast between the lively atmosphere inside and the solitude she had left behind at her mansion weighed heavily on her mind. The doors swung open, and Rosita greeted her with open arms, the warmth of her smile enveloping Lorraine like a comforting blanket. Inside, the living room was a burst of color and joy. A beautifully decorated tree stood proudly in one corner, twinkling lights reflecting off the ornaments that sparkled like jewels. The space was filled with the scent of roasted turkey, sweet cinnamon, and freshly baked cookies, mingling together in a way that felt almost magical. Children scurried about, their laughter ringing out like sweet bells, while adults moved gracefully, balancing plates piled high with food. Lorraine felt a twinge of envy mixed with a shred of hope as she watched the family interact, their bonds evident in every shared smile and playful nudge. Rosita led her into the heart of the gathering, where the chatter grew louder and the laughter more infectious. Lauren's heart raced as she realized how out of place she felt in her designer dress, a stark reminder of her wealth and solitude. Yet, as she stood awkwardly by the door, she couldn't help but be drawn into the warmth of the family dynamic. It was a world she had distanced herself from, a world that echoed with the memories of her late husband and the joy they once shared. The thought of embracing that joy again felt both exhilarating and terrifying. As the evening progressed, Lorraine found herself surrounded by Rosita's family. They welcomed her with open arms, their genuine warmth slowly melting away the icy walls she had built around her heart. She listened to their stories, each tale a thread weaving into a tapestry of shared experiences, laughter, and love. It was a refreshing change from the sterile conversations she had grown accustomed to in her previous life. She felt herself relaxing, the tension in her shoulders easing as the laughter and warmth seeped into her bones. Among the guests, Lorraine noticed a man standing slightly apart from the rest. His name was Donald Green, a friend of one of Rosita's cousins. He had a gentle demeanor, with warm brown eyes that seemed to hold stories of his own. As their eyes met, there was a flicker of recognition, a silent understanding that transcended the crowded room. Both had experienced loss, and in that shared grief, a connection began to form. Donald approached her hesitantly, and together they found a quiet corner amidst the chaos. Their conversation flowed easily, the initial awkwardness fading as they shared snippets of their pasts, each revelation drawing them closer. Lorraine spoke of her late husband, the love they had shared, and the profound loneliness that had settled in after his passing. Donald listened intently, his expression a mix of empathy and understanding. He, too, had faced the darkness of losing someone dear, and it was a bond they both felt deeply. As the night wore on, the laughter grew louder, and the festive spirit enveloped them like a warm embrace. But just as Lorraine began to feel a glimmer of hope, a shadow passed over Donald's face. He glanced toward a group of family members across the room, his expression shifting from warmth to tension. Lorraine followed his gaze, sensing an unspoken history lurking beneath the surface. A family member, a boisterous man with an air of authority, approached Donald. The tone of their conversation shifted, and Lorraine could see the tension between them escalating. Donald's body language changed, his shoulders stiffened, and his easy demeanor faltered. Lorraine felt a pang of concern for him, wondering what could have happened to cast such a cloud over the evening. The atmosphere in the room began to shift as well. Laughter faded, replaced by the low murmur of conversations that turned more serious. Lorraine could sense the undercurrents of unresolved issues swirling around them, and her heart ached for Donald. She wanted to reach out, to comfort him, but the tension was palpable, and she hesitated, unsure of how to bridge the widening gap. As the conversation between Donald and the family member escalated, Lorraine felt her pulse quicken. She could see the muscles in Donald's jaw tighten, a flicker of anger flashing in his eyes. The warmth of the evening began to dissipate, replaced by an uncomfortable chill. Lauren's mind raced as she tried to piece together the fragments of their interaction. What had happened in Donald's past that now threatened to overshadow this moment of connection? Just then, a child ran past, giggling, breaking the tension momentarily. Lorraine watched as Donald's expression softened, a fleeting smile gracing his lips as he glanced at the child. It was a reminder of innocence and joy, a stark contrast to the heaviness that had settled between him and the family member. Lorraine felt a flicker of determination ignite within her. She wouldn't allow this moment, this connection, to slip away into the shadows. She had experienced enough loneliness in her life, and she was determined to embrace whatever spark of hope had ignited between them. She took a step closer to Donald, her heart racing. He caught her eye, and for a brief moment, the world around them faded. It was as if they were enveloped in a cocoon of understanding, a shared acknowledgement of their pain and their desire for something more. But just as quickly, the spell broke as the family member continued to press Donald, demanding answers that seemed to cut deeper than mere questions. Lauren's heart sank as she watched Donald's expression harden again. She wanted to intervene, to shield him from whatever wounds were being reopened, but she remained unsure of how to navigate this delicate situation. The laughter and warmth of the room felt like a distant memory now, overshadowed by the tension that hung thick in the air. The evening wore on, and while Lorraine tried to engage with others, her thoughts were consumed by Donald and the unresolved tension that had erupted between him and his family. The festive spirit that had initially welcomed her into this vibrant world felt fragile, teetering on the edge of something darker. She glanced toward Donald, who was now engaged in a heated conversation, his brow furrowed, the warmth of their earlier connection feeling like a distant dream. As the night progressed, Loren found herself slipping into the background, a spectator to the unraveling of what had begun as a beautiful evening. She could see the sadness etched on Donald's face, the weight of unspoken words pressing down on him. With every laugh that rang out, she felt the distance growing between them, the walls of his past rising up once again. In that moment, Loren realized that the journey to healing was not just about her own loneliness. It was about navigating the complexities of another's heart, too. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for what lay ahead. She could not control the past, but she could offer her support to Donald, a lifeline in the storm that threatened to engulf him. Determined to help him find solace amid the chaos, Loren made her way back to Donald, ready to face whatever lay ahead, even if it meant confronting the shadows lurking in the corners of their budding connection. The warmth of the holiday spirit still flickered faintly in the air, and she clung to that hope, ready to stand by him as they navigated the challenges that awaited them. The atmosphere in Rosita's home was electric, filled with the laughter of children, the aroma of roasted turkey, and the vibrant spirit of Christmas. For Loren Sharp, seated at the elegantly decorated dining table, the noise felt almost overwhelming. The flickering candlelight cast a warm glow on her face, painting her expression with nostalgia and a touch of uncertainty. She had spent so many years in solitude, her mansion echoing with silence, that the lively gathering was a stark contrast to her usual existence. Yet, as she looked around, she felt an unexpected pull, a desire to connect, to share her story, and perhaps to be understood. As the plates were cleared and the dessert was served, Loren found herself surrounded by Rosita's family, who were eager to engage her in conversation. The children were giddy with excitement, their eyes sparkling like the ornaments on the Christmas tree. Rosita's warmth enveloped Loren like a soft blanket, easing the tension that had gripped her since she arrived. Encouraged by the family's genuine interest, Loren began to speak, her voice steady yet tinged with the fragility of memories long held captive. She began with stories of her late husband, recalling how they had met under the twinkling lights of a holiday party, their connection instant and electric. As she spoke, Donald Green listened intently, his eyes never leaving hers. He was captivated not only by her beauty, but by the strength that radiated from her as she described her life with a man who had been both a partner and a confidant. The more she shared, the more the walls she had built around her heart began to crumble. She spoke of the laughter they had shared, the challenges they had overcome, and the love that had filled their home. In those moments, she felt alive, the memories flooding back with a bittersweet potency that brought both joy and sorrow. Donald, who had also experienced the profound pain of loss, felt a connection to Loren that was immediate and powerful. He understood the depth of her feelings, the longing for companionship, and the fear of vulnerability. As Loren recounted tales of holiday traditions with her husband, Donald found himself recalling his own memories, moments that had once brought him happiness but now felt like distant echoes. He admired Loren's ability to share her story with such grace, her vulnerability a testament to her strength. After dinner, the atmosphere shifted as the family transitioned to a game of charades, a tradition that had everyone roaring with laughter and competitive spirit. Loren hesitated at first, the thought of participating in such a lively activity feeling daunting. She feared revealing too much of herself, afraid that the playful nature of the game would expose her insecurities, leaving her vulnerable in front of strangers. Yet, as Rosita's family encouraged her, she felt a gentle nudge towards acceptance, a pull to step out of her comfort zone. The first round began, and Loren watched as Rosita's children burst into fits of giggles, their childish exuberance infectious. When it was Rosita's turn, she mimicked a snowman, her exaggerated movements drawing laughter from everyone in the room. Loren found herself smiling, the sound of joy ringing in her ears like a long-forgotten melody. Then, it was her turn, and she felt the weight of the group's expectant gazes on her. With a deep breath, Loren stood up, her heart racing. She had chosen to act out building a snowman, a simple scene that reminded her of the winters spent with her husband, crafting the perfect snowman in their backyard. As she began to mime the actions, her initial hesitation melted away, replaced by an unexpected thrill. The laughter grew louder, and she could see Donald's encouraging smile among the crowd, urging her on. As the game progressed, Loren felt more at ease, allowing the laughter to wash over her like a warm tide. Each successful guess fueled her confidence, and for the first time in years, she felt a sense of belonging. The weight of her past started to lift, and the joy of the present began to seep into her bones. With every laugh shared and every silly gesture, she felt the tendrils of connection weaving a tapestry of new memories, pushing aside the shadows of her loneliness. After the game, as the evening drew to a close, Loren found herself outside on the porch, seeking a moment of solace beneath the starry sky. The crisp air was refreshing, a stark contrast to the warmth of the house, and she leaned against the railing, letting her thoughts drift. Donald soon joined her, the soft crunch of snow beneath his feet announcing his arrival. The night felt charged, a blend of excitement and apprehension that hung in the air like a promise waiting to be fulfilled. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, gazing up at the stars, each lost in their thoughts. The chill of the evening did nothing to dampen the warmth that blossomed between them. Loren could feel the weight of her solitude slipping away, replaced by a budding hope. Donald turned to her, his expression serious yet gentle, and in that moment, she could see the storm of emotions swirling within him. The conversation flowed like a gentle stream, each word a stone carefully placed to bridge the gap between their pasts. They spoke of their shared experiences, the losses that had shaped them, and the journeys they had undertaken since their spouses had passed. Lauren's heart raced as she shared the pain of her solitude, the years spent in a gilded cage of wealth and isolation. Donald listened, his gaze unwavering, offering her the safe space she had longed for but never thought she would find again. In the depths of their conversation, Loren felt a flicker of something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years: hope. It was a fragile thing, tender and unassuming, yet it ignited a spark within her that had long been dormant. She spoke of the emptiness that had filled her life since her husband's passing, of how the holidays had become a bittersweet reminder of what she had lost. Donald shared his own struggles, revealing the ache of his recent widowhood, a wound that still felt fresh and raw. As they exchanged their stories, the distance that had once separated them began to dissolve. Loren realized that in this moment, under the vast expanse of the night sky, she was no longer alone. She was sharing her pain and her hopes with someone who understood, someone who could see the beauty in her vulnerability. The connection between them deepened, creating an unspoken bond that resonated with the promise of new beginnings. As they stood outside, the world around them faded, leaving only the two of them in a cocoon of warmth and understanding. In that moment, Loren made a silent vow to herself, to embrace the possibilities that lay ahead, to allow herself to feel joy again, and to take the risk of opening her heart. The night felt alive with potential, and for the first time in years, she dared to believe that love could find its way back into her life. The air in Rosita's home, once filled with laughter and warmth, quickly thickened with an unsettling tension as the door swung open. Victor, Lauren's estranged brother, entered with an air of entitlement that immediately drew the attention of everyone in the room. His presence cast a shadow over the jovial atmosphere, and the flickering lights of the Christmas decorations seemed to dim in response to his negativity. Dressed in a worn but tailored coat, Victor's expression was one of disdain, his eyes scanning the room as if searching for an opportunity to unleash his resentment. Loren felt her heart sink as she recognized him. A tumult of emotions surged within her: surprise, anger, and an overwhelming sense of dread. The festive decorations, the aromas of the feast that had previously delighted her senses, now felt stifling. She had momentarily escaped her solitude, her bitterness, only to have it come crashing back in the form of her brother. The laughter surrounding her faded into an uneasy silence, leaving her acutely aware of every heartbeat, every whisper. Victor's gaze locked onto Loren. His voice, sharp and cutting, broke the silence. He wasted no time in launching into a tirade, his words laced with accusations that pierced through the holiday cheer like a jagged knife. He accused her of abandoning their family for her wealth, of forgetting her roots, and of living a life devoid of compassion. Each word was heavy with years of resentment, and Lorraine felt the weight of his anger pressing down on her shoulders. As he spoke, the room seemed to shrink around Lorraine. She could feel the stares of the guests, their eyes darting between her and Victor, unsure of how to react. Donald, who had been standing nearby, immediately stepped forward, his protective instincts kicking in. He positioned himself between Lorraine and Victor, a silent barrier against the onslaught of bitterness. Donald's presence provided a flicker of support, but the tension only escalated as Victor continued his verbal assault. Victor's voice rose, echoing off the walls, revealing family secrets that Lorraine had long buried. He spoke of their childhood, of the sacrifices their parents had made, and of the resentment that had festered between them over the years. Each revelation struck Lorraine like a physical blow, unraveling the carefully constructed facade of strength she had built around herself. Memories flooded her mind, moments of laughter, love, and the stark contrast of her current solitude. She felt exposed, raw, as if Victor were peeling back the layers of her carefully guarded heart. Lauren's thoughts raced as she tried to process Victor's words. She had always known that their relationship had been fraught, but hearing his accusations laid bare in front of so many people was a different kind of pain. It was as if he were holding up a mirror that reflected not just her failures, but the chasm that had grown between them. A chasm she had hoped could be bridged. But here, in this moment, it felt insurmountable. As the confrontation escalated, Donald's calm demeanor contrasted sharply with Victor's heated fury. He stood firm, defending Lorraine without a word, his presence a silent declaration of solidarity. It was a small comfort, but it reminded Lorraine that she was not alone in this chaotic moment. The warm relationship she had begun to cultivate with Donald felt threatened, and the thought of losing that connection added to her mounting distress. In the midst of the chaos, Lorraine felt a surge of defiance. She would not let her brother's bitterness define her anymore. As Victor continued to rant, she took a deep breath, summoning the strength she had long thought buried beneath her grief. She could feel the warmth of the holiday spirit in the air, the lingering scent of the feast, and the laughter of Rosita's family echoing in her mind. All of it was a reminder of the joy she had been missing. With her heart pounding, Lorraine stepped forward, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. She would not shrink back. This was her moment to reclaim her narrative, to stand against the tide of negativity that had enveloped her life for far too long. She looked Victor directly in the eye, her resolve hardening. She had suffered greatly, but she had also found strength and purpose in her solitude. She would not let Victor's resentment drown out the hope she had begun to feel. However, before she could speak, the tension in the room escalated further. Victor, sensing the shift in the atmosphere, intensified his accusations, hurling insults that cut deeper than any knife. The hostility of the moment wrapped around them like a suffocating blanket, stifling the warmth and joy that had filled the space just moments before. Lorraine felt her composure falter as anger surged within her, threatening to spill over. Just as Lorraine was about to respond, she felt Donald's hand gently grip her arm, a silent signal for her to take a breath. She turned to look at him, and in that instant, she saw not just a protector but a partner. His eyes held a depth of understanding that gave her the courage to confront Victor without losing herself to the chaos. With a nod, she acknowledged his support, her heart swelling with gratitude. But Victor was relentless, and as he continued to rage, Lauren's mind raced. She was overwhelmed, not just by her brother's accusations, but by the realization that this confrontation was a culmination of years of unresolved pain and resentment. She could feel the walls of her carefully curated life begin to crumble, and for a moment, she faltered. Feeling the weight of the moment, Lorraine turned and stepped away from the confrontation, seeking refuge in a quiet corner of the house. The festive decorations, once a source of joy, now seemed to mock her. She leaned against the wall, her heart racing as she struggled to regain her composure. The laughter of Rosita's family felt distant, drowned out by the echoes of Victor's bitterness. Donald, sensing her distress, followed her without hesitation. He approached with a gentle demeanor, his presence grounding in the storm of emotions swirling around them. Loren looked up at him, her eyes reflecting the turmoil within. She felt vulnerable, the weight of the confrontation still pressing heavily on her chest. In that moment, she needed solace, a safe space where she could process the chaos of the evening. As they stood together in the quiet corner, the world outside seemed to fade away. Loren could feel the warmth radiating from Donald, a stark contrast to the chill of her brother's accusations. They shared a moment of silence, a breath of calm amidst the turmoil. The connection that had begun to blossom between them felt even more significant now, forged in the fires of shared pain and vulnerability. Donald's presence was a balm to her wounded spirit. She could feel the tension slowly dissipating as she leaned against the wall, allowing herself to be vulnerable in front of him. In this moment, they were two souls navigating the complexities of loss and heartache, seeking solace in one another's understanding. It was a rare moment of intimacy, one that deepened the bond they had begun to form. Loren found her voice, struggling to articulate the whirlwind of emotions that had overtaken her. She spoke softly, sharing her feelings of loneliness, the weight of her brother's bitterness, and the fear that engulfed her as she confronted the ghosts of her past. Each word felt like a release, a shedding of the layers of pain that had accumulated over the years. Donald listened intently, his expression one of empathy and understanding. In that quiet corner, surrounded by the remnants of a once celebratory atmosphere, Loren began to understand that her journey toward healing was just beginning. The confrontation with Victor had unleashed a torrent of emotions, but it had also opened a door to a new chapter in her life. A chapter where she could embrace vulnerability and connection instead of hiding behind walls of isolation. As they stood together, Loren felt a flicker of hope igniting within her. She realized that she was not alone in her struggles and that perhaps, just perhaps, she could find the strength to confront her past and reshape her future. The morning after the tumultuous Christmas Eve, Loren sharp awoke to a muted winter light spilling through the grand windows of her mansion. The world outside was blanketed in fresh snow, its pristine whiteness starkly contrasting with the turmoil that had unfolded just hours earlier. Loren lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, her mind racing through the events of the previous night. The laughter and warmth of Rosita's family felt like a distant memory, overshadowed by the arrival of her estranged brother, Victor. His accusations echoed in her mind, a haunting reminder of the bitterness that had long defined their relationship. Loren rolled over, pulling the heavy duvet tighter around her shoulders, seeking comfort in its warmth. The silence of her home was deafening. For years, the mansion had been a fortress against the outside world, each room a reflection of her solitude. Yet, the isolation that once provided solace now felt suffocating. She could still feel the tension in the air, the residue of Victor's harsh words lingering like a storm cloud. Lauren's heart ached as she remembered Donald's quiet strength, how he had stepped in to defend her, his gaze steady and reassuring. It was a fleeting moment of connection, yet it sparked something deep within her, a longing for understanding, for companionship. As she lay there, Loren sensed the weight of her past pressing down on her. Memories of her late husband flooded her thoughts, the joy they once shared now a bittersweet reminder of her loneliness. She had built her life around success, her career as a billionaire investor consuming her every waking hour. But the emptiness that accompanied her achievements had grown unbearable, especially during the holiday season, a time when families gathered and love was celebrated. It was a stark reminder of what she had lost: a family, a partner, the warmth of shared moments. With a deep breath, Loren pushed herself up from the bed, the decision crystallizing in her mind. She needed to confront Victor. The thought filled her with dread. Their relationship had been fractured for so long, the wounds deep and raw. But as she glanced out at the snowy landscape, an unexpected resolve washed over her. If she wanted to change her life, she had to face the ghosts of her past. It was time to reach out, to seek closure, and possibly to mend the rift that had formed between them. Downstairs, the house was still quiet. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee wafted through the air, a comforting presence that reminded her of the mornings spent with her husband. Lorraine made her way to the kitchen, where Rosita was already bustling about, preparing breakfast. The sight of her housekeeper, with her warm smile and gentle demeanor, provided a sense of comfort and normalcy. It was Rosita's unwavering support that had drawn Lorraine into the lively embrace of her family the previous night. Lorraine felt grateful for her presence, a reminder that not all relationships were steeped in bitterness. Rosita glanced up, her eyes sparkling with a mix of concern and encouragement. She sensed the weight on Lauren's shoulders, the turmoil swirling within her. Without speaking, Rosita poured a cup of coffee and placed it before Lorraine, a simple gesture of understanding. Lorraine wrapped her fingers around the warm mug, letting the heat seep into her palms. She took a moment to savor the familiar taste before speaking. "I need to invite Victor for a conversation," she finally said, her voice steady but laced with uncertainty. Rosita's expression shifted to one of surprise, but Lorraine could see the support in her eyes. Encouraged by Rosita's silent nod, Lorraine felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps this was the first step toward healing, not just for her but for Victor as well. Later that afternoon, Lorraine sat in her library, the grand room filled with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and plush leather furniture. The space, once a sanctuary of solitude, now felt like a stage set for confrontation. She had arranged the room meticulously, creating an atmosphere that was both elegant and inviting. The crackling fire in the hearth added warmth, the flames dancing with a life of their own, casting flickering shadows across the walls. As the hour approached, Lauren's heart began to race. She could feel the tension knotting in her stomach, the anticipation mingling with anxiety. Would Victor even agree to come? Would he come with the same bitterness that had defined their past encounters? She glanced at the clock, each tick echoing the doubts swirling in her mind. Just then, a soft knock on the door broke her reverie. Rosita entered, her expression a blend of encouragement and concern. "He's here," she announced gently. Lauren's breath caught in her throat, a whirlwind of emotions swirling within her. This was it, the moment of truth. She rose from her chair, smoothing her dress as if it could somehow shield her from the impending confrontation. When Victor stepped into the library, the air thickened with unspoken tension. He looked older, wearier, the lines on his face etched deeper than she remembered. The years apart had not been kind to him, and Lauren's heart twisted at the sight of her brother, a man she used to know so well. They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of their shared history hanging heavily between them. "Thank you for coming," Lorraine finally managed to say, her voice steady despite the quaking of her heart. Victor's eyes flickered with a mixture of anger and hurt, but he nodded, taking a seat across from her. The silence stretched, each of them grappling with the ghosts of their past. Lorraine took a deep breath, summoning the courage to speak. "I know things have been strained between us," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "But I want to understand what happened, why we drifted apart." She could see Victor's defenses rising, the familiar bitterness creeping into his expression, but she pressed on, determined to reach him. As they exchanged harsh words, the conversation became a battlefield of emotions. Old grievances surfaced, accusations flying like arrows designed to wound. Lorraine felt the sting of Victor's resentment, the weight of his anger pressing down on her. But beneath the surface, she sensed a flicker of vulnerability. It was a fragile thread, woven through their shared history, and she knew it was time to reach for it. With a deep breath, Lorraine allowed her facade to crumble. "I've been so lonely," she admitted, her voice breaking. "Success means nothing without someone to share it with. I never wanted to lose you as my brother." The words poured out, raw and unfiltered, revealing the depths of her regret and sorrow. She could feel the shift in the air, the tension loosening as her vulnerability pierced through Victor's defenses. Victor's expression softened, the anger fading as he met her gaze. The walls he had built around himself began to crack, revealing the pain he had carried for so long. In that moment, the siblings stood on the precipice of reconciliation, their hearts laid bare. It was a fragile moment, filled with uncertainty, but it was also an invitation, an opportunity to rebuild the bond that had been shattered. As they sat in the quiet of the library, a sense of understanding began to take root. Loren realized that they were both searching for the same thing: connection, forgiveness, and the chance to heal. In sharing their vulnerabilities, they found a path forward, a way to transform their bitterness into a shared journey of healing. The honesty of their exchange forged a new connection, one built on the foundation of their shared losses and the hope for a better future. In the end, Loren and Victor were not just siblings bound by blood, but two souls navigating the complexities of life, each seeking solace in the other. As they embraced the possibility of reconciliation, Loren felt a weight lift from her shoulders. It was the first step toward mending not just their relationship, but also the ache of loneliness that had haunted her for far too long. The journey ahead would not be easy, but for the first time in years, Loren felt a glimmer of hope, a light breaking through the darkness of her past, illuminating the path toward a brighter future. As Christmas drew to a close, the atmosphere in Loren Sharp's mansion was transformed, infused with a newfound sense of warmth and purpose. The usual opulence of her home felt different, no longer just a shell of luxury, but a backdrop for something more vibrant. Loren found herself standing in the grand foyer, adorned with twinkling lights and garlands, reflecting on the events of the past week. The laughter and camaraderie she had experienced at Rosita's bustling home lingered in her mind, filling the cold corners of her heart with a gentle glow. The memories of her days spent in solitude began to fade, replaced by the warmth of the connections she had forged. Rosita and her family had welcomed her into their lives, and Donald Green had become a bright spot in her otherwise shadowed existence. She felt a desire to reciprocate that kindness, to create an environment where love and laughter could flourish. With that thought, an idea began to blossom within her. Loren decided to host a New Year's celebration at her mansion, an invitation for Rosita, her family, and Donald to experience the grandeur of her world. It was a bold move for a woman who had always kept her distance from the warmth of human connection, but there was something exhilarating about it. As she pinned the invitations, her heart raced in anticipation of the joy they might bring. Each carefully crafted note carried with it a promise of new beginnings, a chance to rekindle the bonds of family and friendship that had seemed lost. When the day of the gathering arrived, Loren awoke early, her mind buzzing with excitement. She moved through her vast home, meticulously preparing for the occasion. The grand dining room was adorned with elegant table settings, gold and silver accents shimmering in the soft glow of candlelight. The kitchen was abuzz with activity as Loren oversaw the preparation of a feast that would rival the one she had experienced at Rosita's. The aromas of roasted meats and sweet pastries filled the air, mingling with the sound of laughter that echoed from the living room, where decorations were being hung and the tree was being adorned. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm golden hue across the snow-covered landscape, Loren felt a flutter of nerves in her stomach. She was not just opening her home, she was opening her heart. The doorbell chimed, and she rushed to answer, her heart leaping as she saw Rosita and her family arrive, their faces bright with excitement. They poured into the house, bringing with them the joyous spirit of the holiday, filling every room with laughter and love. Donald was among them, his presence grounding and reassuring. As they exchanged glances, Loren felt a spark of connection, a silent acknowledgement of the bond that had begun to form between them. He moved through the crowd with ease, engaging with Rosita's family, his laughter mingling with theirs, creating a symphony of joy that enveloped the mansion. As the evening progressed, Loren watched as her home transformed before her eyes, becoming a sanctuary of warmth and happiness. The celebration was a success, a beautiful tapestry woven with shared stories, laughter, and delicious food. Loren felt alive in ways she hadn't in years, surrounded by the vibrant energy of those she had once dared not invite into her life. As the clock ticked closer to midnight, the atmosphere crackled with anticipation. They gathered in the living room, vibrant and full of life, ready to count down the seconds to the new year. But just as Loren was about to raise her glass and announce her plans for the future, the door creaked open and Victor stepped inside. The room fell silent, a palpable tension hanging in the air. Loren's heart raced, memories of their last encounter flooding her mind. She had hoped for a smooth path forward, but Victor's presence felt like a storm cloud ready to unleash a downpour. The room remained quiet as Victor explained the gravity of his situation. Lauren's heart softened. She could see the man behind the resentment, a brother in need of support. As he spoke, an unexpected surge of compassion welled within her. She had found forgiveness in her heart, and now she had the chance to extend that forgiveness into action. In a moment of clarity, Lauren offered him a lifeline. She proposed that he come on board to manage one of her investments, a chance for him to rebuild his life while also mending the rift that had long divided them. The air shifted, the tension dissipating like fog under the morning sun. Victor's expression shifted from despair to gratitude, an unspoken understanding passing between them. In that instant, they both recognized the possibility of a new beginning, a chance to redefine their relationship. The clock struck midnight, and the celebration erupted into cheers and laughter. Lauren and Victor shared a glance that spoke volumes, an acknowledgement of their shared history and a commitment to move forward together. Amidst the revelry, Donald approached Lauren, his eyes filled with admiration. He took her hands in his, and the warmth of his touch sent a thrill through her. As the guests celebrated around them, Lauren and Donald shared a tender moment, their connection deepening in the glow of the new year. With the promise of a fresh start hanging in the air, Lauren leaned in closer to Donald, their lips brushing against each other in a soft, lingering kiss. Their surroundings faded into the background as they lost themselves in the moment, a silent vow of love and support forming between them. In that kiss, Lauren felt a wave of hope wash over her, a realization that life could be filled with joy again, even after the darkest of times. As they pulled away, Lauren looked around at the faces of her friends and family, at Victor's newfound hope and Rosita's joyful laughter echoing through the mansion. She felt a profound sense of gratitude. The journey ahead would not be without challenges, but with love, forgiveness, and new beginnings, she was ready to embrace whatever the future held. In that moment, as the first moments of the new year unfolded, Lauren Sharp understood that family could be rebuilt, love could flourish, and life could once again be a celebration.